Hello and welcome back to, well, another piece of content on Valorant esports. It's been a little bit of a while. I've been away. I've been in Madrid, obviously doing VCT EMEA before that. And speaking of VCT EMEA, it is going to be coming back very soon. So I decided I'm going to do a little bit of a tier list video, the creme de la creme when it comes to content, and I wanted to talk about where I'm sort of placing a lot of the teams at the moment. So I've broken it down. It's going to be 3 for every single section, except obviously the bottom one, which is bottom 2, because we have 11 teams, which is obviously fantastic, having such a lovely, complicated number. But as you can see, who I think is going to be making it to Shanghai, who I think is going to be making it to playoffs, maybe winning a game or two throughout the season, and the very bottom 2. Now, for anybody who doesn't know, the way that things kind of work is there's going to be a couple of different groups. It definitely makes things a little bit more complicated, but you kind of play the teams that are not in your group. So that's the way things are going to work. I understand that that's probably the most complicated way ever that things could come out. But it also means that a couple of teams are actually going to be playing 2 matches a week. So look at Team Liquid, for example, in the first week. But for now, I'm going to try and keep things a little bit more simple. Just talk through openly who I think is going to do well and who I think is going to be hot trash. So I want to start off with the good, and I think it is probably the most obvious choice with how they've been competing so far this season. I don't see that stopping for KC. I think that you go into their recent matches, a close game versus Paprex, who ended up finishing top 3, and ultimately losing to the champions in Sentinels. I think that it's hard to deny that this roster has been fantastic from the get-go. I think this man, Eng, has been doing an amazing job of sort of keeping everything in check, basically just building what has been a fantastic team. And you look at their results within EMEA, it's something to almost marvel at. Beating Fnatic fairly comfortably in the end. I think they're star-studded from top to bottom, and I think Magnum has proven himself to be a great IGL. So off the rip, I think that's probably one of the easier decisions to make. I think that especially like the matches they're going to have up and coming. I think that also not having to play, they don't have to play Fnatic. So the one team that I think most are expecting to have a strong comeback, they don't even have to play against until they get to the playoff stage. And having 3 spots, actually don't know, is it double elimination playoffs? It is, so that even if they come up, at this time, if they come up against Fnatic or somebody else, I don't think it's going to be too much of a problem for them to make it back through the lower bracket. And even just getting into this lower final is enough to qualify to Shanghai. So I think that KC being up top is not something massively surprising. I feel like I need to go in the other direction now, put someone a little bit lower on the tier list. I guess we can continue going in the order we have here and just see how it ends up. I feel like it is going to end with maybe me having to switch a few people around. I don't think anybody's surprised to see that either. Although I think Fnatic definitely looked a little bit shaky over in the regular season. I would be very, very surprised if we're not going to see them doing well going into this next season. Like, they lost to KC. Even with what looked like a little bit of shaky performances, they still managed to beat out Vitality, who I think are a relatively strong roster. I also think they played things very safe. Like, we didn't see them really adapt too much in a lot of their play styles. And also, Durka had a quiet performance, which I think is a rarity. Like, he's not... Like, these are some of the quietest performances I think I've ever seen from some of these players. So I would be gobsmacked if Fnatic don't make a turnaround. You've still got the likes of Chronicle performing, Alpha as well. But this man, there needs to be something a little bit more for Durka. He's always been in the conversation of one of the best players in the world, and he didn't really show it, at least in those first matchups. But I think they're a safe bet to make it to Shanghai. I would be surprised. Again, they don't have to play KC this time. Okay, the final week matchup of Na'Vi is interesting, but you have to bear in mind the top 3 from each group go through. I don't know, is Fnatic in the group of... Yeah, and they're in the group of 5. So realistically, as long as they do better than 2 of the teams in their group, I think they'll be okay. Now, Giant X is an interesting one, because I don't know if I put them in the making playoffs or winning a game or 2. I think I'm going to put them here. I do think that they were in a pretty tough group when you go back to their matchups over in the kickoff tournament. Like, I think they had a tough group. Now looking back, obviously at the time we were quite surprised, but these are the 2 qualifying teams, and then they lost to and every single game they played was close. Like, they took a map off KC. And now, again, as I said, looking back, it's not bad. They've also made a roster change. I don't know if getting rid of Nuke will necessarily fix the problem, but it seems like they're also going to switch Vitinho away from the duelist. Again, that may be down to the fact that we're seeing less Jet. But his Raze was always... Actually, his Raze a lot of the time was better than his Jet if you look at the stats. But yeah, I think it's going to have a little bit of teething issues. I don't know if... See, this seems harsh because that puts them in the bottom 5, but I just think we have better teams at the moment. And then it leaves me on to Koi, which, again, I think the hardest thing, genuinely, especially when you're... Because I'm basically predicting 5 weeks of play in the first week. I will say doing tier lists and pickups like this is really dumb because I don't really think there's actually a way to accurately do this, but we'll see how it goes. I think I may end up changing this, but I don't know. See, the thing is, Koi weren't bad. Koi were better than Liquid, so does that mean I have to put... Oh, that will really be toxic. I might actually have to put Liquid in the bottom 2, which is kind of mad because they really didn't perform too well. But yeah, I think that Koi came in better than I thought they would be. I think, like, again, like, opening up against BBL, they looked fairly comfortable. I think that obviously the first matchup, you're going to look at this and go, wow, they lost to Liquid, but come on now. Come on. This is insane. Like, it was one of the best performances I think it is the most kills we've seen in EMEA coming out of Kiko, and they only just won the match. So, yeah, I think that for now I'm going to leave Koi in the bottom 2, but I'm not necessarily sure that's going to happen. The problem is, again, they're on the side where they get to play against BBL, but that means they're not in that group. So it definitely makes things that a little bit more interesting in terms of, are there 3 teams in this group that I think that they can finish above? And the answer is no. In fact, actually, that's why I will put them in the bottom 2. I don't think they can beat anyone on their side. I think that Gentlemates will beat them. I think that Foot will beat them. I think that Na'Vi will beat them. I think Heretics, depending on the roster, will beat them. So yeah, I think they have to go bottom 2 just because of the group they're in. I think if they played BBL and maybe even a Liquid, I could put them here. But just looking at what group they're in, even though you don't play your own group... Actually, wait, that's the point, isn't it? They play this group. Shit, that's so complicated now. Because they could realistically get wins and still not qualify. I'm going to leave it for now. We'll move on. Na'Vi... See, can I really do this straight off the rip and have 3 teams already up the top? I know that this one might be a little bit more controversial because I feel like people are very down on Na'Vi at the moment. But I've got to type Natus Vincere, don't I? I think they're going to do better this time out. I think that they still looked pretty decent. They lost to Heretics that were informed. They lost this map of Sunset, and I'll be honest, then they looked boomed. They still came incredibly close to winning it. Their Breeze got wrecked. But the main worry I have for Heretics right now is that this man here is not going to be there for the first couple of weeks because of school. And that's good. That could easily put them down the list in a little bit more problematic a scenario. I also think Artist came in and looked really strong on a wealth of different agents. And also, I think this man has an agent that was specifically built for him in the form of Clove because he can run in and die and it can actually work. So I think they're going to cook something up. I know that I've basically off-rip put in 3 teams here. And I actually think the playoff score is going to be more difficult because, again, I want to go back to Heretics. Heretics, I think, have looked really good. I'm super impressed with Benji especially. Like, this performance from him, I'm going to be honest and say I didn't see him being this good. Like, I thought he would come in. I thought he would be at the bottom of this Heretics roster. And I thought he'd be okay. Like, I think communication-wise and other stuff that he brings to the team, like hyping them up and being a positive person, that I all thought was going to be there, and I thought he'd be a good teammate. I did not think he'd be the top fragger in a game versus PaperX. I didn't sit there. And especially his Sunset, even though he wasn't actually as high up, I think his Sunset play is fantastic. I think all of his setups are awesome, and I think that he's done a brilliant job individually. The problem is, for the first 2 weeks... they don't have this man. Now, that could argue then that they go up here as well, which I would have to move someone down. Maybe that makes more sense. I just, for some reason, have blind faith in Na'Vi. Maybe it's because my girlfriend joined them and I'm just rose-tinted glasses. Who knows? But I think obviously he'll be back later in the season. I do think that will shake them a little bit. Also, they're having problems with Woot. Like, it really just seems like a horrible time for Heretics to try and really sort things out, which is a shame because I think their team has been great. But if I have to talk about a team that I think might fall down a little bit, it's going to be them. I'm going to put Liquid here. I genuinely, I don't have a lot of faith in Liquid at the moment. I think it was mainly because of the loss. Like, firstly, they got battered by Na'Vi. Like, this game wasn't even particularly close. Like, you're talking not getting a single defensive round on Split. You're talking barely getting any attacking rounds on Breeze. Like, this is not a good look for Liquid, and I think something drastically needs to change. Enzo, unfortunately, individually, just not having great performances. Now, they've got a stacked squad, so that shouldn't necessarily be a problem. I don't want to put it all on him. Nat's having some quiet games as well. It's just shaky. And I don't know if they're going to be fixing all of that. And that's the thing with Liquid. This roster is, again, similarly to last year, expected to be in the bracket of team that could win it all. They're not. And speaking of a team that I think they have to go here. I think that Vitality are definitely making playoffs. I also think they're another team that could make it to Shanghai. I do question if it's going to be an upgrade, though, and it being Trex, because I think that it's more questioning how much intrinsic value did Destrian bring that we're not just including fragging power. Because I think that's the thing that people seem to forget, is that this man here, he played the shittiest role basically on every map. Like, recently, they even switched him over to playing Sentinel, which he never really did. It wasn't something that I would watch him play and be like, oh, yeah, no, Destrian Sentinel. In fact, let's just look overall. Where does Sentinel sit? There you go. 4 and 7. Like, he barely played it, but just seemed to, whatever role was needed of him to play, he went back to. He was very good at playing controller. He was very good at playing initiator. But for some reason, maybe it's because they knew he was leaving, he just ended up playing roles that to me didn't make any sense. Now, is Trex going to put up more numbers? Definitely. I don't want to harp on Destrian at all because I think he's great at his role, but I do think that Trex is going to put up, he hasn't played in a while, a lot of numbers. Like, the guy can play a lot of different roles, and every single time you can see he's putting up ACS, he's putting up ADR every single time. This guy mechanically is very gifted. I just don't think he has the same supportive elements. And I think that was visible when you would play with Koi. Like, he just wasn't necessarily that guy, which, okay, in that team is what was needed of him. The question I now ask of Vitality is, who is that guy? Is it going to be Kicks? Is it going to be Safe? Because Safe, a lot of the time, again, numbers off the charts. I wouldn't call him a support player. Maybe Sender's going to try and take up that role. But that's where I worry for them, is that they don't have someone who I think intrinsically fits that. And although I think they're going to be better than a lot of the teams below them, I don't think they're going to be better than Fnatic. I don't think they're going to be better than KC. Because KC have a lot of players that can fill that bracket of setup. Like, even their star players are very good at doing that. Now, Foot, I think, are actually going to complete my making playoffs. Again, similarly to what I said about Giants, they played in now what looks like the group of death, and the only teams they lost to were the teams that qualified. They beat Giants, and in some regard, quite handedly, and they even were taking maps off KC, who we now, you look how close this game was. They smashed them on Bind, and it went 2018. So I think that I'm not as bad a spot as people might be thinking. I think the only real worry is this man, because these stats for CNET are underwhelming, especially when they removed Kiwi, who I think it's inarguable is a more flexible player. I am a little bit worried in that regard. I don't see them making it to Shanghai unless things change drastically and he has a big step up. Also, Cracks was a little bit underwhelming. Like, for someone who, I think if you look at his overall KO stats, they're going to be, I guess they're about the same. But he just is able to put up a lot more numbers normally, individually, and I didn't really see that. And it seems like he's trying to play other stuff, and he's probably one of the best KO players in the world in a meta that really does fit. I think I have to do that. The thing is, I've been hearing a lot recently that BBL and scrims actually look pretty good. Now, I've never been a Scrimbucks guy. It's never going to be me. I think that especially going off winning scrims. I don't care if you win scrims, because that it depends what the other team are doing. It depends what you're doing. Are you practicing things, or are you just playing a match? Because if you're just playing a match, then you're not really utilizing your scrims properly. They kind of got slammed by Koi, who I also have down at the bottom. So I can't really put them anywhere else. They took a map off Na'Vi, but again, it's Na'Vi, where Na'Vi first game of the tournament looking like shit is not the most surprising thing in the world. I do think that players like Pora can definitely step up, and I don't think that this is a bad team. The problem is I just think everybody else looks better. Amalt, to finish the list, it's going to be Gentlemates. Actually, I want to put Gentlemates here. I know that it doesn't make that much of a difference, but I genuinely think they're the team that I think is most likely to squeak a playoffs run out of all the other teams. I think that they have great coaching staff. I think that some of the individual players on that team are fantastic, and I think they're very good at learning from their mistakes. So coming into Breeze here, they looked great. I think Takaz has looked phenomenal, not even just going off the stats, but I also love their combinations. I think Bayaz is someone who's heavily underrated, especially when you go into their Sunset. Now, their Sunset here was shit, and they also lost it again here. But they had a lot of cool combinations that were used to set up in the tank and Takaz, and I think that they're a decent squad. So I do think that there's genuine possibilities that they make the rise up here. I don't think they'll be qualifying to Shanghai. I think that's a bridge too far, and I'd probably just... I think this is my order of how I think things are going to go. Maybe even these two the other way around, because I do think Fnatic are going to have a fantastic bounce back. Either way, that is my tier list for EMEA. That's how I think things are going to go. As said, I'm predicting... Well, especially Shanghai, I'm predicting 6 weeks in advance, so if I'm wrong, feel free to laugh at me. It's very much possible that that's going to be the case. And let me know if you'd move anybody up. Where do you think? Maybe you think Koi are going to be up for Shanghai? Maybe you think Na'Vi are going to be in the bottom 2. That's perfectly fine with me. Maybe I'll do this for the other regions if I have time, but if not, I will see you on the show on Wednesday. I believe I'll be casting the opening match with Mitch, so I'll see you then. Either way, thank you very much. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe, and I will see you soon.